It has been said that average people want you to stay average. Welcome to the Breaking Average podcast, the podcast designed to challenge you to break the mold that average has on the world. Each episode offers insights directly from those who choose to break average every day. Now, for the latest insights, here are your hosts, Paul Gustafson and Mike Harbour.
Welcome to the Breaking Average podcast. Today is episode number 29. My name is Paul Gustafson, and my co-host is Mike Harbour. Hey, Mike, how you doing, man?
Hey, Paul, I'm great. It's great to be with you. I'm excited about our podcast today, man. The weather, I'm looking outside my window, Paul. Perfect blue skies, green leaves on the trees. Never a better time.
Well, that also means we got to cut the grass. So my wife wants to know, am I taking ownership on the grass cutting? And we're talking about ownership today, and we're in part 2, so it's going to be a lot of fun. And we're talking through the 7 critical factors of team strong leadership from the book Breaking Average. And it's not just the book Breaking Average. We got stories. We've got so many different examples and evidence of the importance of this, especially with ownership. So I can't wait.
Yeah, it's going to be good. Speaking of cutting grass, Paul, I just sold my house and moved into a condo. And it's fantastic because I'm really a lazy leader. I don't like to own anything, honestly, even though I've kind of co-authored this chapter on ownership. I don't really like to own anything. And this condo we moved into, they cut our grass here for us. I'm stoked for that. I gave my lawnmower away yesterday. I had a push mower, right? I gave it away to my dad yesterday. It's fantastic. But yeah, I'm excited. This is a great book. Number one, Breaking Average, 7 critical factors for team strong leadership. As you know, Paul, this is one of my favorite chapters in the book because as I've said before, to me, it's the critical factor. Ownership is the critical factor. You can talk about all the other things, but until somebody takes ownership and leads and pushes things forward, nothing ever happens, right? And so this is the chapter all about action, which I love. And so, we're going to dive a little bit deeper into the second element of ownership today. And we got Rick with us again too. I think he got out of bed to join us this morning. Rick, are you there?
I sure did. And it's funny it's beautiful here as well, right? Perfect weather, except that we have this sheen of yellow everywhere.
Oh, yeah.
The pollen is out and literally have to wash the car almost every day. Cause it's just, it looks like literally a bag of flour. It's just a yellow flower sitting outside the house. So yeah,
it's miserable. That's the part that's miserable this time of year, right, Rick? It
for sure really is
for sure nasty. For sure. Paul, we as we dig into this, what we always like to do as we begin each episode, we like to begin with a story. And you wrote several great stories in this book, but one in ownership. I want to have you kind of share the story for this element of empowerment that we're going to talk about today. Why don't you do that real quick?
Yeah, happy to. Actually, I've got a story that's not in the book, but we'll write it up as we'll put it as a blog out there for everybody. Last week, we talked about Operation Crush. You guys remember that?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, because we had some fun with the orange part, right? So
yeah, very fun.
Yeah. So this one right here is Operation Dynamo, right? Operation Dynamo. You guys familiar with this story at all?
Is it Rambo? Is that from Rambo?
No. It's military related, but maybe a little bit more specific and important than that. So there's a couple great movies that came out a few years ago. You guys may be familiar with it. One is Dunkirk, produced by Christopher Nolan. And the other one is The Darkest Hour. I forget who the actor is. 2 great movies. Have you guys seen those movies?
Absolutely.
I've not seen either one of them.
Oh, man, you've got to see them both.
And I love war movies too, man. I'll have to go check those out.
And I might suggest that you watch The Darkest Hour first, even though that came out after. Watch The Darkest Hour, then we'll go watch Dunkirk. Dunkirk, Christopher Nolan, he's just a great movie director, producer. They together, if you watch those together, you get a real feel for what happened back then. 1940, World War II. The U.S. is not yet in the conflict, right? But there's some bad stuff that's happening. Hitler's trying to make his move. He's already invaded Poland. He's trying to hit France. In fact, there's a big battle. They call it the Battle of France. So the German army is advancing through the northern parts of France, the Battle of France. The German military, basically, they cut off thousands of British troops, so there's this big sever between the British troops and the French allies. All looks lost. The Allied soldiers retreat to Dunkirk Beach. So it's this big beach there on the corner of the channel, and they're kind of trapped there. And meanwhile, Churchill and the war cabinet, they're already considering negotiating peace with Germany. They just don't see how they're going to survive this thing, and so they're thinking about, well, maybe we can find some peaceful negotiations with Hitler and find a way to essentially surrender. When you think about it, so it all looks like a lost cause. But in the midst of the decision-making process, Churchill, I love it in how they did this in the movie. Churchill is on his way to Parliament, and he gets stuck in traffic, and he jettisons. He just leaves the cab driver, whoever's driving him in the Rolls Royce, of course, and he goes to the London Underground. And I don't know if you've ever been to London, but I've been on those trains, the tunnel. It's kind of interesting. It's kind of fun. If you haven't done it, it's definitely an experience worth doing. So he takes the Underground, and they're like aghast. People are on this train, and they look, and they're like, "Holy cow! That's Winston Churchill." And it's just a great scene. It's one of my favorite. Rick, you've seen it, right?
Absolutely. Yeah.
Fantastic scene. So he's sitting there, and he doesn't have a big speech to share like he normally does, because he's just trying to get to Parliament. But he asks them some questions. He leans in. He's a leader who leans in. He asks them about, what they think about what's going on, and if they'd be okay if they negotiate some sort of peace treaty with Hitler. And he finds out the civilians, all of them, they want to continue to fight. They believe in their country. They have a sense of ownership and who they are as citizens of the United Kingdom. And he sees their resolve. They all want to take ownership in the fight. So Churchill gets to Parliament, basically says, "Hey guys, look, I've been thinking about this," essentially, and I can't do a Churchill impersonation, so I'm not going to even try. He says, "We've been thinking about this for a long time, and here's what I believe we got to do." And he really just does a powerful little speech with that group, and basically gives the green light for Operation Dynamo. And that's where the Royal Navy basically does a requisition of civilian vessels. Imagine that. Talk about ownership. Calling out to anybody who's a fisherman to go help them out. They got troops stuck on Durkin, and they got to go, or Duncan, they got to, Duncan. They got troops stuck on Durkin, and they got to go rescue them. And so there's about 933 ships involved here. They lost, I don't know, maybe 230 of them, but they saved 338,000 Allied troops. 224 of them were British. Just unbelievable when you look at that story. So that's the Christopher Nolan movie that you need to watch after, Mike. Watch that. It is the biggest evacuation in military history. It lasted 9 days. And then afterwards, Churchill, in an address to the House of Commons, has one of the greatest speeches of all time. And I don't have time to read the whole thing, but here's an excerpt of it that is pretty powerful and may be recognizable by many of you guys. He says that we shall go on to the end. We shall fight in France. We shall fight on the seas and oceans. We shall fight with growing confidence and growing strength in the air. We shall defend our island, whatever the cost might be. We shall fight on the beaches. We shall fight on the landing grounds. We shall fight in the fields and in the streets. We shall fight in the hills. We shall never surrender. That is the ownership factor right there. Pretty powerful.
Churchill is the ultimate example of ownership, right? I mean, when he took office, Hitler had been kind of charging through Europe, right, and trying to conquer the world, and Churchill came in and just took ownership, and then, as we talked about in our last podcast, to find the opportunities for his country, and then, as you just gave a great example on the train ride, right? It began to empower the people by asking for their advice, asking their thoughts. So Churchill's a great example of a true, true ownership and leadership. And he didn't shirk that responsibility. He knew he had to make tough decisions that were, you know, tens of thousands of people would die, right? Which, gosh, as a leader, that would be so hard to do. But it's either that or let Hitler take over the world. So I'll go watch those two movies, Paul. I haven't watched those, which is surprising because I love war movies. As you know, I mean, one of the movies the movie that should have won, you know, our movie series back a while back. You know, We Were Soldiers, Once and Young. I mean, great war movie. I just had to get that plug in there. You guys kind of messed me up in that, but I love that you brought that story in, because Churchill is one of my favorite kind of ownership leaders, Paul. So thank you for bringing him. Rick, let's talk about the three elements that we're really talking about in ownership that we're sharing with our leaders, our audience right now.
I think we just developed a fourth factor, which is letting things go, Mike. You lost. It's over. Let it go. But
let it go. Sing it, Rick. Sing it, buddy.
What I'm really trying to do, Rick, is to create ownership in you guys for, you know, to realize that movie should have won, right? I'm really trying to create ownership for you guys here versus let it go.
That's the four things. No, so the three elements of ownership we talked about: to find the opportunities in the last podcast. Today we're talking about empowering team members. And I can't wait to get into that discussion. Of course, implement solutions. And the quote I found, I think, dovetails nicely if we change a couple of words into what Churchill said. But the quote comes from Simon Sinek. It says, "Start with why customers will never love a company until the employees love it first." And I mean, Churchill, what he saw was, you know, the belief in the country, that the people loved the country, so it was worth fighting for. And I think that dovetails nicely.
Yeah, that's so good. And as we move along to Dunkin' Donuts Island,
or the Gherkin Island.
I had to get that in there.
Oh, that's funny.
Hey, if you're a returning listener to the Break It Average podcast, or even on the Empowered Living Show, thanks for continuing to tune in and let us share ideas with you as well. We're always looking for leaders that can add value to the world, that have great stories to tell. And, you know, right now we'd love to talk to those leaders who have demonstrated great ownership, maybe just taking the bull by the horns as Churchill has done. If you know someone like that we could talk to, Breaking Average podcast.com/leader. You can go there and just kind of give us the information. We'll do the rest. But if you'll visit our website, breakingaveragepodcast.com/leader, that'll help us out. We appreciate that.
Yep. And then our sponsor today, Mike, is Jazz Incorporated, which is actually owned by Gloria Burgess, who we've recognized on the show several times before, even had her on the show. And you can find her at www.gloriaburgess.com, BURGESS.com. And she integrates her business and artistic acumen to inspire and equip the current and future generation of leaders to make the difference only they can make. And I love when business owners have that ownership and have a title that includes their why. And, you know, Gloria's husband is a great conductor, and she has a lot of artistic acumen as well. And so they can really bring that creative side to the business that a lot of times leaders really need to hear. So thank you to Gloria for being our sponsor today.
Yeah, she's actually, I love that she is sponsoring this episode because we're talking about empowerment, right? And her husband, John, who is he a conductor or a maestro? What is
maestro,
he called?
I think probably.
Yeah, maestro.
Better, yeah.
You talk about like empowering, right? That's the maestro's job. He's not really in control. He controls kind of the flow of the music, but he's got to empower all the other musicians to bring, you know, magic to what they do. And so I love that she's our sponsor. Let's talk about, what does empower mean? I know he's been chomping at the bits for the last couple of weeks to talk about this because, you know, he thinks he knows and he wants to. I don't know if he wants to debate or argue, but it's going to be real fun, I know, in this portion. What does empower mean? Why is it important? Rick, let's go at it, man. Let's start with you.
Well, I'm not going to debate or argue, but the term is so misused. It's so people say these words that they want to empower. They don't know what it really means, and it became a buzzword. And what frustrates me in the business world is when we commoditize a word. And it changes its meaning. So, agile has been commoditized, and a lot of people have different views as to what that means. And a lot of people, I saw an advertising campaign, it was like empower your team. And it was for a project portfolio management system that I believe in. But I'm like, that has nothing to do with empowering your team. Your team gives you the information so the executives can make decisions. So what about this is empowering your team? Right. It's like we've used this term, empower itself. When you ask me, what does it mean? It means to give power to, right? Someone to give power to, or to make someone stronger and more confident. The key words here are give and make, right? So empowerment means you're transferring power to somebody else, and it has to do with trust. But there's a flip side, right? That also means that you think someone else needs you. Right? They need your permission, your influence, your talents to do something. And that's true to a point in terms of, if I'm a leader, I'm going to empower my team to make a decision, but also that has this inherent kind of thing that they need you, right? That you're required in that portion. And I think empowering means letting go, right? Empowering means allowing yourself to lose a movie competition. It means letting go of certain. I didn't intend for that, but boy, that really flowed out nicely. But if you're really thinking about empowering people, right, what you really need to consider is, how can I get out of their way?
Yeah.
Right. How can I better understand what they really want? Right. How can I make it clear what they do matters to me? How can I uncover what makes meaningful, interesting work for that person? That's empowering the team. But so many times we take this word and we say, well, go do this. And I'm empowering you to do it, but do it exactly as I say, how I say it, when I say it, why I say it. And so I just think it becomes a really misconstrued item.
Mm-hmm. For sure. I'd echo that too. I see it, right? And, here's the reality of it. In a leadership capacity, when you have been given that mantle, given that baton to be a leader, you kind of want to hold on to it sometimes, and be careful. Don't grip that baton too tight. You have to hand the baton off occasionally. You can't control everything. So when leaders are put in positions of power, they need to be able to relinquish that power. Most leaders by instinct don't want to relinquish power. They just don't. And so you can't empower other people unless you do. So when you empower someone, it may feel like you're giving up control to your power, but actually here's what's happening. The truth is that first of all, what happens when you fail to empower them, right? When you fail to empower others, you actually lose power. I've seen that, right? I've seen people who are just very control oriented. They want everything to go through them, micromanage, whatever terminology you want to apply to it, but they're very controlling. And when they don't empower others, they actually lose power. And empower means, but on the other hand, right? So think about what Rick was talking about. Empower means you trust somebody, right? You're offering, you're giving, you're making something happen, you're trusting them. Lack of empowering means you don't trust them. So empower is what creates buy-in. Lack of power is what creates silos, right? Within an organization, a community. We've all seen silos. Well, silos means that somebody wasn't empowered properly. It creates dysfunctionality, and that's never good. So when you have empowerment, people stay. That's what's really cool, is that when you can really create that culture of empowerment, people want to stay there. They want to be a part of that team. They want to help be part of the solution. The problems get solved. And so I think that builds on what Rick's talking about. Mike, what are your thoughts on this?
Yeah, I love this topic as well. We could dive really deep. I don't think I can add any to the definition of how you guys have defined it, but I just, to simplify a couple things, just a couple thoughts. Rick talked about it. Empowering is giving my strength to someone else, right? Giving, so it's really about giving my title. If I'm the CEO and I empower my team, they carry my authority, right? That's like I'm giving my authority up to them so that I can go do something that is more in my strength zone. However, and this is a big however, as a leader, you can't take back that authority. If they do something and they're carrying your authority and they do something that maybe you don't necessarily agree with, you can, as a leader, throw them under the bus. Right now, you've disempowered them. They'll never trust you again. You've broken that power, right? So you've got to support them and say, yeah, maybe if they make a decision someone doesn't agree with, and you've got to have their back. I see this oftentimes where a leader, they say they're empowering their team and then something doesn't go their way. And so they throw their team under the bus. They disempower them, right? And they don't support them. They don't have their back. I'm reminded in this topic, as Rick brings this strength into, there's an old proverb that says a 3-cord strand is not easily broken. Mm-hmm. And I don't know where that comes from the Bible. I don't know where exactly that's at, because I'm not a theologian, but I think about that is I'm not necessarily completely giving up my strength. I'm lending my strength to others, right? So when we look at the three of us on this podcast, I'm lending my strength to Rick. Rick's lending his strength to me. Paul is lending his strength to each other. So that way we're all stronger. I mean, each of us has strengths that the others don't have, right? So that's where true empowerment comes in, is where we share our strengths with each other so that we're all empowered to move forward faster together. And I think that's the real essence of empowerment, and not taking it back and then saying, when Rick messes something up, I don't throw him under the bus. I say, hey man, we're in this together. I'll help you get this fixed. And that's where I really think empowerment comes in as well.
Yeah. Yeah, it really does. I'm just writing notes down, guys, and I wrote down that when you empower somebody, and I love your comment about disempowering, right? There's nothing more that takes air out of a sail worse than empowering somebody and then taking it away, disempowering them. Like, oh no, sorry, no. And that's not a good feeling. And we're going to we want to walk through some strategies to help you with that, so that you can truly empower people and allow them to take ownership and to make an impact and influence, and maybe helping you as a leader to just allow them to work through it. I think that's really important, because sometimes, let's be honest, we want to look over their shoulder. We want to see how things are going, and that's well and good, but are we micromanaging? Are we trying to control it still? Are we really giving up, allowing them to have ownership and allowing ourselves to give up that control that we think we need to have? Because that's not going to help anybody, right? So, I read a book by Jocko Willink I thought was really powerful. He says, when a team takes ownership of its problems, the problem gets solved. He emphasizes that this is true on the battlefield, it's true in business, it's true in life. And so I think that's really powerful. Guys, let's get into it. How can we cultivate empowering others? So Rick, what's your thoughts on this?
Well, one, to come back from Mike, I wrote in Project Management That Works, the 100%, 10% rule. Basically, as a project manager, I own 100% of the failure. No ifs, ands, or buts. I do 100% of the failure. It's on me, and I only share 10% of the success. And that, to me, was a way to kind of outline how I feel about empowerment. But I think if I really want to, just personally, it's something I believe in. I'm a consultant, right? And it's funny when you look at the big guys, the big four consultants. One of the big metrics that they look for is called after work. And that means how many more billable hours could they generate after the initial engagement? That's a metric that's tracked. It's widely known. That to me is disempowering, right? It's teaching them to be reliant on that consulting firm. So when I'm going through a client, one of the first things I say to my team and to my client is that my goal is to work myself out of a position. That's what I need to do. If you're still relying on me a year from now for this problem, I haven't done my job. And you should fire me. And that's announcing an intention. But the point of that is it also becomes a mantra for me, is that it's yes, you're hiring me because I have a strategy or an answer or understand how to solve this problem. But I need to then have the empowerment of the team to solve it and continue to run it going forward. So I'm constantly thinking of what is it that I'm doing every day and how do I not have to do that, right? And how do I transfer that power and transfer that knowledge to somebody so they can pick it up and run, so that I've done my job, which is to consult. I didn't come on as an employee. I didn't come on a 6-year engagement. I came on as a consultant, which means I need to consistently look at how to work myself out of that position so that they've grown and then potentially hire me again for another problem some other time, right?
Mm-hmm.
But so to me, to really show that I want to empower the team is I announce it as an intention. I tell them my goal is in 6 months, you don't need me. You guys have it.
Yeah. Yeah. It kind of gets into succession, which could be a topic in itself, but succession planning, it's got the word success in it. And whether you're a consultant or whether you're an employee, at some point in time, you need to be able to hand the baton to somebody else. You got to reproduce yourself on other people. Mike, what are your thoughts on this, man? What are some tactics and strategies to cultivate this concept of empowerment?
Yeah, I think let's talk about what cultivation is first, right? That's an old farm term. As you guys know, I'm an old farm boy, right? I grew up on a little farm, and so I love to use farm analogies. But cultivating is getting the ground ready, pulling the weeds, fertilizing, watering, getting that ground prepared. And so when we think about empowerment, here's where leaders get into a lot of trouble. They think, okay, I'm going to give up my authority. I'm going to give someone else the responsibility. And then when they do it wrong, as Rick's point, I own 100% of failure. So leaders are afraid of that, right? They're afraid to own 100% of the failure. Mm-hmm. So the key in empowerment is cultivation. Like, where do you come alongside of those people you're empowering to make sure they don't fail? Not micromanage, but to come alongside them and cultivate. Hey, what if we thought about it this way? Questions are key, right? Questions are key. What if we thought about it this way? What if we looked at it from this angle? Why did you do it that way? Where did you get that idea from, right? Not, hey, Rick, you're an idiot. Don't do it that way. Or no, don't do it that way. Do it this way. It's about asking questions. This is the key to cultivating empowerment. And then when we do that, we build trust, because when I have understanding, so if I come alongside Rick and I'm asking him questions, now I understand, which is a key principle in leadership. Seek first to understand, then to be understood, right? Yeah. From Stephen Covey's 7 Habits book. If I come alongside of Rick and ask questions to understand why he's going, because ultimately in empowerment, it's about getting to the end result, right? It's not that Rick does it exactly like me. It's that we get the end result that we're seeking. And so Rick may do it completely different. I'll use an example on the podcast for our listeners and our viewers on the Empowered Living Show. We make a lot of mistakes recording this podcast. I'm horrible at it, but Rick makes us look better. I think. I don't go back and rewatch his edits, but I think he makes me look better at times. But see, our listeners, they don't really see that part of it, right? And what I don't do is I don't come along. I don't tell Rick, hey, Rick, fix that. Don't leave that in. Don't edit that out. Don't make me sound stupid. I don't really come alongside of Rick and try to micromanage. He's got the power. He's got I've empowered him to make me look better. Hopefully he's doing it. Maybe I should go back and watch some, Rick. I don't know.
Maybe so.
But that's, those are kind of my thoughts about cultivating this idea of empowerment. It's not about just giving it up and leaving somebody to fail. It's coming alongside of them and making sure we're asking questions, walking along in success with them, right? Walking along in success and making adjustments. I mean, I think of, great football teams or great basketball teams. We're finishing up the March Madness. Arkansas Razorbacks had a great run in the tournament this year, made it to the Grade 8, which we hadn't done since 1995. So it was fantastic. It was madness around Arkansas, obviously. Eric Musselman, the basketball coach, was fantastic at making halftime adjustments, right? When things weren't going well. So that's what empowerment, he empowers his team to go out and play in the first half, and then he makes adjustments at halftime. And look, Tennessee, Rick wears a Tennessee jersey, which I can't stand, but Pat Summitt, I don't know if y'all have ever heard the story about how she empowered her team during halftime to make adjustments, right? She didn't coach them. They coached herself. The team went to a whiteboard and said, what do we do right? What do we do wrong? What are we going to fix in the second half? And then she would come in and coach. That's what empowerment is. I mean, go back. I don't know if y'all have ever heard that story about how she did that at halftime. She's now deceased. Fantastic coach. One of the greatest ever. As you can see, I get fired up when I talk about empowerment because I think it's that important.
Yeah, it is very important. And you, speaking of Tennessee, Rick, you had a chance to meet her, didn't you?
I did. And you actually just made me reflect, Mike, on the one of the things I've got back here is a signed part of the gym floor when we ripped it up and turned it into the summit piece. So I've got Pat's autograph on that. But when she passed, there was a wonderful thread on UT alumni boards. It said, if you ever got the stare, tell the story. And that was one of the greatest threads I've ever had. But I'll make a super long story short. As a freshman, we got the gym after women's basketball. I played volleyball at Tennessee. So we practiced like 6 to 8 o'clock at night. You know what I mean? Like it was, we were the last to get anything. And as one of the things is when practice wasn't going well, then she'd run over. And as a freshman, I had to set up the nets, and the seniors would tell me, they're like, oh, she knows it's our time. You can go ahead and go in and put a pole up and start working. And I'm a dumb kid. So I go in, I start putting a pole in, and you hear this whistle, and I look, and I got the old blue eye stare, man. And I was severely frightened. Basically I just took the pole out and left. And she said, hey, 11, come over here. And she goes, I know this happens every year. So you're the freshman. She goes, but if that door is locked when you come, you stand outside and you just sit there and go, yes, ma'am. I mean, she commanded this respect. I think one of my favorite things I ever saw her do, though, was take over a men's practice. So at the time, Alan Houston was there and his father was the coach. They were not participating to the level that she felt a Tennessee team should. And she was just walking through the gym, did not like the effort, blew her whistle, and Coach Houston just stepped aside, and she had him running wind sprints and whipped them into shape really quickly. She was amazing to watch. Yeah, I was so blessed. And final piece is right before we went to go for a national championship, she gave us a pump-up speech. In the locker room, we played it in Knoxville, and I wanted to run through a wall. I was so fired up to go play, and she was amazing, man. She was one of a kind for sure.
Yeah, great coach.
Great coach. And a sign of a great coach. You talked about practices more than the games themselves when you think about it. And, I think a coach looks to see if their athletes are really owning it. Really, it's about empowerment at that point, because, sometimes, let's face it, there are athletes, it's just practice, right? And it's a half-hearted effort in terms of what you see out of an athlete in the practice. And a great coach is like, no, we practice the way we play. And, it's so important for us that this practice that we put out and we perform in this practice, and you got to own it. You got to own it. And so
come on, man. It's just practice. We're just talking about practice, man.
Allen Iverson, baby.
Sports fans will know that. Comment,
That's right. That's right. And, it's so important. It just might be practice, but it might be the most important practice that you do. And that's what's key. Here's the thing, right? It can be tough, guys. Let's face the truth, right? As a leader, you're delegating somebody to go do something. And a couple things might happen. Like, you may not know how it needs to be done. And so you struggle with it. Like, well, I need somebody to go do this, but I don't know how that's supposed to be done. Well, that's probably why you need to hand it off in the first place. You don't need to know how. Right? All you need to know is the what, right? What needs to be done? What do you need? So the way that I try to do it now, guys, is say, hey, look, here's what we need. Here's what I need. Here's what we need. Here's why, to your point from our last podcast a week ago. Make sure you kind of hit the why, and then identify when. Like, can you get something to me by, next Friday? I need something. This is when we need it. I don't tell them how. As much as I want to, I try not to. Because I want them to figure out the how. Because when they own it, they're going to go figure it out. Now, if they've got questions for me, that's fine. That's great. I'm going to kind of walk alongside them. I'm going to cultivate, as Mike talked about. But I don't want to just give them a stack dump, a cognitive stack dump. Here's how you do it. All right. I've done that too many times as an engineer. It doesn't work. All right. It doesn't work. Tell them what, tell them when, what and when. And don't get caught up in the how. The empowering is allowing the other person to figure out the how. That's the empowering, is letting them figure out the how. And good things happen.
Yeah, I mean, that's that right there, Paul. That's the essence of what Pat Summitt did. Not to keep belaboring a Tennessee coach, but I mean, she literally, I've said many, many times on this podcast that leadership's not what happens when you're in the room. It's what happens when you're away, right? And what she did is her team, she empowered her team so much that they would coach themselves at halftime, right? They had the whiteboard. What did we do right? What did we do wrong? What are we going to adjust? And then she stepped in to make any course corrections, right? She didn't just come in and start screaming, yelling. I'm sure she did at times, right? If they played really bad, but she, for the most part, she let them coach herself. They figured the how. They know. I mean, most people already know the how. They know, kind of where they've made mistakes, right? I think that's the great thing about where, as a leader, one of the greatest things we need to learn about leadership is to let others figure out the how. We just point direction, the possibilities, as we talked about in the last podcast as well.
Yeah. And here's the key point for Pat and these great coaches: when they go to that evaluate, like here's what I need, here's what I need done and when I need it. And then when they go to evaluate, to your point, you evaluate to elevate. You evaluate to elevate. If you're evaluating and you're not elevating, you're doing it wrong. Always evaluate to elevate. That's the key. That's good.
Hey, before we go much further, Paul, I want to make sure we highlight our sponsor again, Gloria Burgess. Business name is Jazz Inc. Her and John have a fantastic story. Gloria's written a book as well. Does a lot of team development, but you can find more out about Gloria at Gloria Burgess, BURGESS.com. She integrates her business with her and John's artistic acumen to inspire and equip the current and future generation of leaders to make a difference only they can make. And I've seen them in action. I love their story. We want to just recommend that you check out GloriaBurgess.com to learn more.
Yeah, and she definitely elevates. She's fantastic. You get a chance to have her speak to your group, your tribe, man, bring her in. Bring John in, her in. Fantastic. Well, it's time to close out another great podcast. And again, we're thankful for Gloria as our sponsor. And Rick, thanks for being our producer and our in-studio guest again today. We miss Diane. She couldn't make it today. But glad to have you here, Rick. Rick, any closing thoughts?
Yeah, with the Pat Summitt story and them being on the whiteboard, right? It dovetails into one of the biggest aha moments of my life in being a directive leader versus an empowering leader. And it came from our friend Christian Simpson, where he says, if you give somebody the answer, you rob them of a lifetime of learning. Mm. So by allowing a team to go try to solve the problem themselves, one, you find out what they actually do know. Right? Like you said, they know. Yeah. Well, she's able to sit back and say, do they have the answer to solve this? Can they get to it? And where do I need to be able to instruct? But allowing that to happen, they then took ownership of the issue and solved it themselves. And I think that is the difference between, championship teams and mediocre teams.
Yeah, it's well said.
That's good.
So, Mike, you have a tip and challenge for us?
Yeah, I was just thinking, what would be the best tip and challenge today? This to me, you guys were pretty good today. I mean, not pretty good. Y'all were really good. I recommend the tip is that our listeners go back and re-listen to this episode today. There's some great learnings. I've taken lots of notes. Rick, I'll actually go back and listen to this one because there was some really good stuff in here that I can use in my own life, my own leadership, and the consulting that I do as well. So re-listen to this, and the tip is to go back and listen to Rick's definition of empowerment. What does that really mean? And then think into your own leadership and how well do you live that out? Think of that three chord strand. Are you really giving up your authority? Or are you trying to maintain control. There is a difference, and it's a fine line, but that's really the difference between, empowerment and disempowerment of others. So that's my tip and challenge for today, Paul.
Yeah, I love it. That's good. Yeah, my tip is engage the team, guys. Engage the team, Pat Summit, whomever it is, go follow that model, right? Think of Churchill. Think of the subway, right? What's your subway moment today? What's your subway moment, right? Connect with the group. Find out what's going on. Listen in. Tell them what. Tell them when. Let them figure out the how. So that's my challenge. Listen to see how others can help, right? What they can do to contribute to what you're doing. Remember, we talked about that a few weeks ago. In fact, Gloria was a co-author of that chapter on contributions, and it certainly ties into this whole empowerment thing. Ownership requires everyone on the team to step one ring further up the ladder and truly commit to those values in order to achieve the vision. So when you think about that vision that we talked about last week, right, we're defining what the opportunities are, vision. Next step here in this element is empowerment, right? That's so critical for us to do it. We're allowing them to live out those values. And that's what I love. That's the challenge that we have. I would just say, look for subway moments today. So, yep.
My subway moment, you brought back memories I don't remember. Well, I'll tell the first time I ever wrote a subway story another time, because I know we need to wrap up today, but that's all I could think about is my first time I ever wrote a subway.
And I'm not talking about subway that you're eating, by the way.
Yeah, I'm not either. It's funny. But anyway, Paul, Rick, always a pleasure to do this with you guys. You make me laugh. You make me think. This to me was one of our better topics that we really dove in today, because it is so important. I mean, people think they empower, but they really don't, right? They kind of hand responsibility over, but then they maintain the power and control and authority. So this was a great topic. I want to recommend our listeners also visit our website. Paul's been writing some great blog posts recently. So go visit breakingaverage.com, and make sure you also leave us a review on the podcast platform that you're listening, or even on our website. And then if you've got a leader you recommend that we talk to, go to breakingaveragepodcast.com/leader as well.
Yep. Guys, great conversation. Really enjoyed it. Rick, thanks for producing once again. But I love this topic. I love our passion for helping people break average. We want to hear your stories. Go to that website that Mike just mentioned. But guys, once again, I'm inspired by our empowerment and our mission of leadership and breaking average. Join us again next time.
Thank you for listening to the Breaking Average podcast. If you loved what you heard, please take a moment to subscribe. All opinions and comments expressed in this podcast are those of the participants and do not reflect the opinions or views of any of the advertisers, producers, or platforms. This show was produced by R2 Multimedia. A special thank you to Milestone Melodies for our theme music. As you continue your day, what is one action that you can apply from this podcast to your life? Tune in for our next episode as we continue to challenge everyone to break average.